We are not taught how to be alone. We are taught how to be chosen, how to be liked. From an early age, we are wired to seek connection, not just authentic soul-level connection, but approval, validation, belonging at any cost. We learn to shrink ourselves, to bend, to mold, to perform, so we are not left behind. But what happens when the pursuit of people becomes the loss of self? What happens when the fear of being alone overrides the truth of who you are? Let me be bold here. Chasing people will never lead you to yourself. You can't evolve when your identity is built on being accepted. You can't grow when your worth is outsourced to someone else's attention. You were not born to earn your worth through the presence or approval of others. From the moment you took your first breath, your value was already whole, already intact, already sacred. But somewhere along the way, this truth got buried under the weight of conditional love, under systems and stories that taught you to measure yourself by who stayed, who clapped, who noticed. You began to link your sense of enoughness to how others treated you. And in doing so, you gave away the most powerful thing you'll ever own, your ability to define your own worth. It starts small. A friend pulls away and you wonder what you did wrong. A partner grows distant and you contort yourself to win them back. A parent criticizes and you internalize their voice until it becomes your own. Before you know it, your inner dialogue is shaped not by truth, but by fear. You ask, am I too much or not enough? You ask 5, what will make them stay? Rather than 5, what feels true for me? And over time, that desperate need to hold on to people, even those who drain you, becomes more important than holding on to yourself. We all crave connection. That desire is not wrong. It's deeply human. But when connection turns into chasing, when it becomes about performing, pleasing, or begging to be chosen, it's no longer connection. It's survival. It's you trading your wholeness for crumbs of belonging. And even when you get those crumbs, those fleeting moments of being seen or loved, they don't last. Because somewhere deep inside, you know the truth. You had to abandon yourself to be accepted. You had to betray your own boundaries, silence your voice, suppress your needs, just to keep someone else from walking away. But the absence of others does not mean the absence of worth. Someone leaving doesn't make you less. Someone rejecting you doesn't make you broken. Someone not choosing you does not strip you of the right to be loved. Their inability to stay, to understand you, to honor your heart, that is not your failure. That is not your reflection. It's theirs. And the moment you begin to separate their choices from your value is the moment you begin to return to yourself. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy. You don't have to be constantly strong, endlessly giving, or consistently available to earn love. Love that is real doesn't require you to chase it. It meets you where you are. It holds you through your messy seasons. It celebrates your becoming, not your performance. And when people choose to walk away, not because you failed, but because you dared to be authentic, that is not a sign of your inadequacy. It is a sign of your growth. You cannot keep handing your worth to people and expecting them to protect it. They won't. Not because they're cruel, but because it's not their job. That responsibility belongs to you. You are the guardian of your own value. You are the keeper of your truth. And every time you look outward for someone else to validate your existence, you create a void that only grows wider. There is a freedom that comes when you realize you don't have to chase, that you don't have to convince anyone to stay, that the people who truly see you will never need to be pursued. They'll stand beside you not because you twisted yourself into someone you're not, but because they recognize your essence, because they feel safe in your presence, because they know that real connection doesn't demand a performance. It invites vulnerability, truth, and mutual care. You are not unworthy because someone didn't see your light. You are not flawed because someone couldn't meet you where you needed them. And you are not broken because you felt deeply, loved fully, or hoped sincerely. If anything, that's evidence of your courage, your tenderness, your beautiful refusal to harden in a world that tells you to toughen up. Your softness is not the problem. Your desire to connect is not the problem. The problem is when you give your power to those who can't hold it, when you let their absence define your value. Some of the people you chased were only meant to be lessons, not lifelines. Some of the ones who left did so because your growth outpaced their comfort. Some couldn't love you in the way you needed, not because you were unlovable, but because they had never learned to love themselves. And yet, you blamed yourself, you tried harder, you begged in subtle, quiet ways. Through text sent too quickly, boundaries softened too soon, need silence too often. But begging will never build the love you deserve, and chasing will only ever lead you further from yourself. Your worth does not rise and fall based on someone else's ability to stay. It doesn't shrink because someone walked away. It doesn't disappear because someone couldn't handle your truth. Worth is not a currency to be earned. It is a birthright to be claimed. And the moment you stop asking others to hand it to you is the moment you begin to rise. You don't need more people to choose you. You need to choose yourself in the spaces where others didn't. You need to be the one who stays when others go, the one who listens when others dismiss, the one who holds your hand when others turn away. That is what true belonging feels like, when you no longer need to be chosen to know you matter, when you no longer chase what was never aligned with your becoming. when you stop measuring your worth by the absence or presence of someone else. So let them leave. Let them misunderstand you. Let them fall away if staying requires you to abandon yourself. Their exit is not your failure. It is your liberation. Every closed door, every unanswered message, every relationship that couldn't hold you, it brought you closer to this moment. The moment you stop chasing, stop shrinking, and start reclaiming the power of knowing that your worth was never theirs to give. We live in a world that treats solitude like a punishment. We're taught to believe that if you're alone, something must be wrong, that if no one is texting you, calling you, needing you, wanting you, you must be unloved, invisible, forgotten. But the truth is, there is nothing more powerful than a person who knows how to be alone and chooses to embrace it. Solitude is not loneliness. It is not emptiness. It is expansion. It is the birthplace of self-awareness, the soil in which growth takes root, the silence, where you finally begin to hear your own voice again after years of noise. When you stop running from your own company, you start to realize how much wisdom lives inside of you. The parts of you that you were too busy to notice, too afraid to face, too distracted to honor, they begin to emerge. In solitude, the masks fall away. You are not performing, not pleasing, not navigating anyone else's expectations. You're just there with yourself as you are, and that is where the real evolution begins. Because when you stop trying to be everything for everyone, you start becoming something true for yourself. The reason solitude feels so unfamiliar isn't because it's unnatural. It's because we've been conditioned to fear it. From childhood, we're praised for our ability to play well with others, for being sociable, agreeable, popular. But rarely are we taught the value of self-reflection. Rarely are we taught how to sit in our own presence and feel whole. Instead, we seek distraction. We fill every quiet moment with noise, scrolling, texting, talking, moving, so we don't have to feel what's underneath. But solitude strips away the distractions and invites us to see what's real. It invites us to come home to ourselves. And that coming home isn't always peaceful at first. Sometimes the silence is deafening. Sometimes it brings up pain you thought you had buried. Sometimes it reminds you of the parts of you that you've neglected in the pursuit of being liked, being needed, being wanted. But that discomfort is not a sign that you're doing it wrong. It's a sign that you're waking up, that you're peeling back the layers, that you're meeting yourself where you truly are, not where you pretend to be. Solitude becomes powerful when you stop trying to fill it and start allowing it to fill you. When you sit in it not as a void, but as a space rich with possibility. It's where you start asking the questions that get drowned out in the chaos of everyday life. What do I really want? What do I believe in? What brings me peace, not just praise? What would my life look like if I stopped trying to make everyone else comfortable and finally prioritized my own wholeness? These questions don't always come with quick answers. But that's the beauty of solitude. It gives you the time and space to let the answers rise slowly, organically. You're not rushing. You're not performing. You're not just reacting. You're creating. You're becoming. You're discovering that you don't need a full social calendar or constant external validation to feel full. You just need to reconnect with the parts of you that got lost in the noise. There's a quiet confidence that emerges when you learn to be alone, not because you've given up on people, but because you've stopped giving yourself away. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop outsourcing your happiness. You stop waiting for someone else to tell you who you are. You begin to understand that your solitude is not a deficit. It's your greatest asset. It's where your boundaries strengthen, your self-worth deepens, and your authenticity shines. When you stop chasing people, solitude is what greets you. And at first, that can feel like abandonment. But with time, you realize it's an invitation. It's life clearing the stage so that you can finally hear your own story. It's the universe giving you the space to write new chapters, not ones written by obligation or fear, but ones written in truth and freedom. You begin to discover what actually brings you joy, what actually drains you, what actually aligns with your spirit, not just what earns approval from others. And once you know who you are in the quiet, you stop accepting noise disguised as love. You stop tolerating half presence, half effort, half respect. You stop mistaking attention for affection. You stop feeling the need to be needed in order to feel valuable because you've met yourself in the stillness. And what you found there was someone whole, someone resilient, someone powerful in her own right, not because others say so, but because she knows so. Solitude teaches you how to hold space for your own emotions, how to witness your grief without shame, your anger without guilt, your joy without needing to justify it. It teaches you how to self-soothe, how to self-regulate, how to self-respect. And those skills don't just serve you when you're alone. They transform the way you show up in every relationship. You're no longer entering connections from a place of neediness, but from a place of abundance. You're not trying to fill a void. You're sharing your overflow. There's also a sacred intimacy in solitude, the kind that doesn't require words. The kind that doesn't ask for applause. The kind that reminds you that your spirit is enough, even in the silence, especially in the silence. And when you learn to feel safe in your own company, everything changes. You no longer fear being left because you know you'll never leave yourself. You no longer panic when others pull away because your identity isn't built on their closeness. You no longer hustle for attention because you've already given yourself the attention that matters most. Solitude isn't just a pause in connection. It's a portal to transformation. It's where your soul stretches, where your heart recalibrates, where your vision sharpens. It's where you begin to make choices not from desperation, but from alignment. And the more you honor your solitude, the more magnetic you become. Not because you're trying to attract anyone, but because you've stopped betraying yourself. And there is nothing more powerful than a person who knows who they are and refuses to forget it, even in the quiet. In a world that constantly tells you to stay busy, stay connected, stay visible, choosing solitude is a radical act. It's an act of reclaiming your time, your energy, your attention. It's saying, I don't need to be everywhere for everyone. I need to be here for me. And when you start showing up for yourself like that, you evolve. Not in spite of being alone, but because of it. There's a deep and often invisible cost to chasing people, a cost that accumulates not in obvious, dramatic ways, but in the subtle, quiet compromises we make day after day. It doesn't start with betrayal or heartbreak. It starts in the small, almost unnoticeable moments when we begin to disconnect from ourselves in order to be closer to someone else. We say yes when we mean no. We laugh when we want to cry. We shrink when we long to expand. And over time, this collection of small self-abandonments becomes a pattern so familiar we begin to confuse it with love. Chasing people is not always physical. It's emotional, psychological, and deeply internal. It's the way you second-guess your words, your feelings, your needs just to maintain peace. It's the way you make yourself smaller in hopes that someone else will feel comfortable enough to stay. It's the unspoken agreement you make with yourself that their presence matters more than your truth. And the more you chase, the more disconnected you become from your core. The irony is that the harder you chase people, the more you lose sight of the person you were before the chase began. You stop asking, what do I want? And instead ask, what will make them stay? You stop checking in with your boundaries and start bending them. You override your gut feelings, your exhaustion, your inner alarms, all for the illusion of connection. Because let's be honest, when you're chasing someone, you're not building a relationship, you're performing. You're working, you're trying to convince someone of your worth instead of standing in it. We chase people because we fear what their absence might mean about us. We attach their silence to our flaws. We link their lack of interest to our inadequacy. We create stories in our minds that say, if I were better, more lovable, more enough, they wouldn't have pulled away. And so we hustle. We try harder. We text first. We forgive too quickly. We lower the bar and call it compromise. But this isn't love. This is a transaction where you give pieces of yourself away in exchange for attention, for scraps of validation, for moments that feel like intimacy, but are actually fueled by anxiety. When your identity becomes entangled with someone else's approval, you lose access to your own emotional compass. You begin to confuse being wanted with being valued. You think if they need you, they'll keep you. If they depend on you, they'll stay. But being needed isn't the same as being loved. Being chased isn't the same as being chosen, and being tolerated isn't the same as being honored. But you won't realize this if you're too busy chasing. You'll be too preoccupied trying to fix, to please, to morph yourself into the shape someone else desires. There's also an emotional exhaustion that comes with constantly chasing someone who isn't aligned with your truth. It drains your energy, your creativity, your joy. It keeps you in a reactive state where your self-esteem rises and falls with every reply, every mood shift, every unpredictable interaction. You become hyper-aware of their emotional landscape while ignoring your own. You lose sleep over their silence, overanalyze their words, and begin to anticipate rejection before it even arrives. And still, you chase. Because it feels better to hustle for connection than to sit with the ache of being alone. But in the act of chasing, you're slowly abandoning yourself. You're sending the message to your inner child, your heart, your soul, you're not worth staying for. You have to work to be loved. You are only safe when someone else chooses you. These messages may not be loud, but they are powerful. And over time, they shape your self-concept. They convince you that you are not enough on your own, that your value is always external, that being alone is a punishment, not a portal to freedom. There's also a hidden resentment that builds when you're constantly chasing. You begin to feel unseen, unappreciated, exhausted from trying. But because you've convinced yourself that this is the only way to be loved, you stay. You chase through the resentment. You tell yourself they'll change, that if you're just a little more patient, a little more perfect, a little more whatever, they'll finally meet you halfway. But they don't. And you start to feel angry, not just at them, but at yourself, for staying too long, for lowering your standards, for forgetting what it feels like to be met with real love, mutual respect, and ease. Chasing doesn't create safety. It creates anxiety. It keeps you on edge, always wondering what more you can give, what more you can sacrifice, what more you can become. But the moment you realize that love should never cost you yourself is the moment everything begins to shift. Because love at its core is not earned through pursuit. It's offered through presence. It's built on mutuality, on truth, on acceptance. And you can't build anything real while you're chasing someone who's running from themselves or from you. There is a profound reclaiming that happens when you stop chasing, when you take all that energy, all that care, all that effort you've been pouring into someone else and turn it inward. You begin to rebuild the parts of you that got lost in the pursuit. You begin to remember who you were before the longing took over. You begin to honor your needs, your voice, your time. And you start to see clearly, not just the people you were chasing, but the parts of you that believed you had to. Because chasing people doesn't just cost you time or pride, it costs you identity. It keeps you fragmented, uncentered, and disconnected from your essence. And no relationship is worth that kind of loss. Not the relationship with the person you're pursuing, and certainly not the relationship you have with yourself. You don't need to be everything for everyone to be worthy. You don't need to earn love through overextension. You don't need to hold your breath in hopes that someone else will finally see your value. You can exhale. You can pause. You can stop running and start returning to your truth, your worth, your dignity. Because when you stop chasing, you don't just stop moving toward people who were never meant for you. You start walking toward yourself. Boundaries are often misunderstood. They're labeled as selfish, cold, or even aggressive by people who benefited from your lack of them. But in truth, boundaries are not walls. They are not punishments. They are not ultimatums. Boundaries are declarations of self-respect. They are lines drawn not to shut others out, but to keep you rooted in your truth. They are a way of saying, I am no longer available for what harms me, drains me, or erases me. So many of us grew up believing that to be loved, we had to be agreeable, available, and accommodating at all times. We were praised for being easy to get along with, for saying yes when we meant no, for keeping the peace even if it meant losing our voice. We learned early that being liked was safer than being honest. And so slowly we started confusing love with tolerance. We learned to endure, to tolerate, to absorb. We accepted emotional labor as our responsibility. We convinced ourselves that the more we gave, the more lovable we would become. But boundaries are the antidote to that internalized belief. They are the brave decision to choose alignment over approval, to choose clarity over confusion, to choose self-trust over people-pleasing. Setting a boundary is not about making others uncomfortable. It's about making yourself whole again. It's about acknowledging that you cannot keep giving from a place of depletion and expect to feel fulfilled. It's recognizing that your needs are valid, your energy is sacred, and your peace is not up for negotiation. A boundary says, I trust myself enough to know what I can hold and what I can no longer carry. It says, I'm no longer available for relationships that demand my silence. It says, I refuse to contort myself into a version that others find more palatable. Boundaries are not built on resentment or bitterness. They are built on love, the kind of love that starts within. The kind of love that says, I care about you, but I will not abandon myself to keep you comfortable. The most challenging part about setting boundaries is not enforcing them. It's dealing with the emotional aftermath. It's the guilt, the self-doubt, the fear that you're being too much or too distant or too harsh. It's the discomfort of being misunderstood. Because when you start to honor your own limits, the people who benefited from your lack of them will often push back. They'll question your motives. They'll accuse you of changing. And the truth is, you have. You've stopped leaking your energy. You've stopped betraying your needs. You've stopped accepting crumbs and calling it a feast. Boundaries don't mean you love others less. They mean you love yourself enough to stop living in a state of quiet resentment. They mean you've grown tired of carrying everyone's emotions while neglecting your own. They mean you're learning to say, my peace matters, my needs matter, my healing matters. And that kind of love is not selfish, it's sacred. It's the foundation of any relationship that is built to last. When you don't have boundaries, every yes you say to others becomes a no to yourself. You overextend, you overcommit, you override your exhaustion, you stay in conversations that drain you. You show up when you're emotionally empty. And the longer you do this, the more you begin to lose sight of your own needs. You become a stranger to your own discomfort. You numb, you disconnect, you perform. You survive instead of thrive. But with boundaries, you begin to reclaim your emotional landscape. You begin to say, I'm allowed to rest. I'm allowed to disconnect. I'm allowed to not explain my choices. You begin to live from a place of authenticity rather than obligation. You become less reactive and more responsive. You begin to experience relationships not as burdens to manage, but as spaces where mutual respect and honesty can breathe. Boundaries don't push people away. They reveal who is willing to meet you in the space of truth. They filter out the connections that only existed because you kept bending. And while that might feel like loss, it's actually alignment. The people who truly see you, the ones who value your presence, your energy, your truth, they will not be threatened by your boundaries. They will honor them. They will respect them. They will understand that loving you also means loving the limits that keep you well. Sometimes boundaries sound like silence. Sometimes they sound like not today. Sometimes they look like leaving the message on read. Sometimes they're spoken clearly. Other times, they are embodied through your absence. But no matter how they're expressed, they're necessary. Because without them, you are wide open to everyone else's emotions, needs, and expectations, while your own get buried under the weight of being agreeable. And it's not just about relationships with others. Boundaries are also the foundation of the relationship you have with yourself. They help you prioritize your healing, protect your rest, and stay connected to your intuition. They help you say, I deserve the same level of grace, understanding, and care that I extend to everyone else. They help you stop betraying yourself in the name of being loved, because any love that requires self-abandonment isn't love. It's performance. The more you practice boundaries, the more you begin to trust yourself. You learn that you can hold discomfort without collapsing, that you can survive someone else's disappointment, that you don't need to explain your worth to anyone. You begin to realize that peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of alignment. And alignment comes from knowing your limits, honoring your truth, and refusing to apologize for your growth. You start to attract different people, people who value clarity over confusion, people who don't just take from you, but pour into you, people who meet you, not because they need something from you, but because they see your light and want to protect it, not dim it. Boundaries make room for those people. They make room for you. They make room for the life you've always wanted, the one that doesn't require you to be everything for everyone, but just fully, wholly, unapologetically yourself. Letting go is often viewed as a loss, a sign of weakness, a giving up. But more often than not, letting go is the beginning of something far more powerful. It is the space where your becoming begins. It is not the end of your worth or the collapse of your identity. It is the sacred threshold between who you were and who you are becoming. Letting go is not the absence of love. It is the presence of clarity. It is the brave recognition that holding on to the wrong people, the wrong stories, or the wrong patterns is not love, it's survival. And you were not born to survive. You were born to become. There are moments in life where the pain of holding on becomes heavier than the fear of letting go. Moments where your spirit begins to whisper, there's more for you than this. You weren't meant to stay here, and yet we cling. We cling because we've woven our identity into someone else's presence. We cling because the relationship, the friendship, the job, the image, it became a mirror that told us who we were. Letting go feels like losing a part of ourselves, and in a way it is. But it's only the part that was never truly ours. The part that was built on pleasing, proving, performing. The part that was always trying to earn love by becoming small enough to fit someone else's comfort. Letting go is not rejection. It is redirection. It's life rerouting you back to yourself. But before the clarity, there is usually chaos. There is usually grief. Because when we let go, we are not just grieving the person or situation. We are grieving the future we imagined, the identity we attached to, the false sense of safety that came with holding on. It takes immense courage to look at something you once begged the universe for and say, this no longer serves me. This is costing me my peace. This is pulling me away from who I'm meant to be. Sometimes we hold on simply because we're afraid of the unknown. We'd rather sit in familiar pain than risk unfamiliar peace. We rationalize, minimize, justify. We tell ourselves, it's not that bad. Maybe it will change. Maybe I'm asking for too much. And in doing so, we become prisoners to hope. Hope that they'll wake up, that they'll understand, that they'll finally choose us the way we've chosen them over and over again. But not all hope is healing. Some hope is denial dressed up in devotion. Some hope keeps you stuck in cycles where your needs are unmet and your voice is unheard. There's a kind of quiet self-abandonment that happens when you keep showing up for someone who doesn't show up for you. A kind of slow erosion of the self when you convince yourself that love is only real if it hurts. But love should not hurt more than it heals. Love should not feel like a fight for your worth. And any connection that requires you to constantly betray yourself just to keep it intact is not a connection. It's a cage. Letting go doesn't mean you didn't love deeply. It doesn't mean you didn't try. It doesn't mean you failed. It means you finally recognize that love is not supposed to be one-sided, that your effort alone cannot sustain something that requires mutual commitment, respect, and care. It means you stopped hoping someone else would become the person you needed and started becoming that person for yourself. It means you saw your own reflection clearly for the first time and decided not to keep dimming your light for someone who refused to see it. There is a profound kind of self-respect in letting go. It's you choosing your peace over your patterns. It's you saying, I will no longer shrink myself to be loved. I will no longer stay in places where I am merely tolerated. It's you walking away, not in bitterness, but in bravery. Because you understand now that love should not require the sacrifice of your soul. The moment you let go, the grief is real. You feel the achy of what could have been. You question whether you made the right decision. You miss the good moments. You mourn the version of yourself who believed if you just tried harder, gave more, loved deeper, it would all work out. But slowly, clarity begins to rise from the silence. You begin to feel your power returning. You begin to notice how much energy you spent holding together something that was never meant to be yours long term. And in that space, you start to breathe differently, deeper, freer. Letting go makes space for becoming. Space to rediscover the parts of you that got lost in the chase. Space to build a life that's rooted in your truth, not someone else's absence. Space to choose differently, to believe differently, to love differently. You start to realize that letting go wasn't the end. It was the invitation to begin again. Not from pain or panic, but from presence, from intention, from love that starts within. You don't have to carry what you've outgrown. You don't have to explain your healing. You don't have to justify why you're choosing peace over pleasing. There will be people who don't understand your decision to walk away. There will be moments where you doubt yourself. But every step you take away from what harmed you is a step toward what will heal you. Every moment you spend alone, instead of chasing someone who doesn't value your presence, is a moment where you learn to value your own. You are allowed to outgrow relationships that once felt like home. You are allowed to unlearn beliefs that told you love was earned through suffering. You are allowed to become someone new without seeking permission. Because this sacred journey of unbecoming everything you were told to be so you can finally become who you really are requires room to stretch, room to rest, room to evolve. And sometimes that room can only be found on the other side of release. Letting go doesn't mean your love wasn't real. It means your love for yourself finally became louder than your fear of being alone. It means you chose alignment over attachment, healing over habit, becoming over belonging to the wrong people. It means that you finally stopped settling for almosts and started choosing wholeness. It means that your evolution could no longer wait for their awakening. Choosing yourself is one of the most radical and life-altering decisions you will ever make. Not because it's loud or dramatic, but because it quietly rewrites every part of how you move through the world. It's not just a moment of self-affirmation, it's a daily, deliberate practice. It's a shift in energy, in priorities, in the narrative you've been taught for years, that your value depends on what you do for others, how much you sacrifice, or how well you fit into someone else's expectations. Choosing yourself is not selfish, it's sacred, and it is the birthplace of your evolution. From the time we are young, we are conditioned to give ourselves away. We're told to be accommodating, to not make a fuss, to say yes even when we mean no. We're praised for being helpful, likable, agreeable. And over time, we begin to wear those things like armor, confusing them for our identity. We become so focused on being chosen by others, by friends, lovers, employers, society, that we forget how to choose ourselves. We forget that our worth doesn't come from how many people want us, but how deeply we stand in our own truth. Evolution isn't about becoming someone different for the sake of others. It's about stripping away everything that was never really you in the first place. And the only way to do that is to stop waiting for someone else to choose you and finally do it for yourself. Choosing yourself means honoring your needs, even when they're inconvenient. It means standing up for your truth, even when it shakes the ground you walk on. It means no longer shrinking to fit the spaces you've outgrown and no longer apologizing for taking up space. It can be terrifying. Because choosing yourself often means disappointing others. It means setting boundaries with people who expect your compliance. It means speaking honestly when silence would make you more likable. It means walking away from what's familiar, even if it's what you've known your whole life. But that fear you feel, that discomfort, it's not a sign you're doing the wrong thing. It's a sign you're breaking old patterns. And those patterns were never designed to support your growth. They were designed to keep you small, palatable, easy to manage. When you choose yourself, you stop asking for permission to be who you are. You stop explaining your healing. You stop justifying your rest. You begin to see your time, energy, and attention as precious resources, not things to be given away carelessly in the hope that someone will finally see your worth, because you already see it. And from that place of self-recognition, everything begins to shift. You no longer tolerate what once seemed acceptable. You stop participating in dynamics that drain you. You begin to trust your gut, your pace, your vision for your life. There's an immense power in realizing that you don't need to be understood by everyone, that your job is not to manage other people's perceptions of you, that you don't have to perform to be loved, that you can be fully, wholly yourself and still be worthy of connection, of joy, of rest. You begin to show up differently in the world, not because you're trying to prove something, but because you've stopped hiding. You've stopped editing yourself to be digestible. You've stopped negotiating your worth. Choosing yourself isn't always glamorous. Sometimes it looks like walking away from relationships you once fought for. Sometimes it looks like being alone on a Friday night rather than spending time with people who don't value your presence. Sometimes it means saying no, even though your voice shakes. It means facing the discomfort of unfamiliar territory, trusting that what's on the other side of that discomfort is freedom. It's a path that isn't paved by applause, but by alignment. And alignment doesn't require validation. It requires courage. When you choose yourself, you become the anchor in your own life. You stop drifting with the tides of other people's expectations. You become grounded in your purpose, in your values, in your own self-worth. You begin to make decisions based on what feels right, not what looks good, not what pleases others, not what keeps the peace at your own expense. You learn to sit with your own approval, your own voice, your own intuition, and that is a powerful place to live from. People may fall away when you choose yourself. They may not recognize this version of you, the one who doesn't bend so easily, the one who says, enough, the one who prioritizes peace over people pleasing, let them. Because the people who are meant for you will not be threatened by your wholeness. They won't require you to diminish yourself in order to keep them comfortable. In fact, they'll celebrate your evolution. They'll rise with you. And that's the difference between connection built on control and connection built on truth. Choosing yourself is not a one-time act. It's a daily practice of returning to your breath, returning to your boundaries, returning to your own side. It's asking yourself again and again, what do I need? What do I value? What do I want to create? What can I release? It's about giving yourself the love you've so freely given others, the patience, the compassion, the grace. And when you do that, you stop begging for it in return. You stop waiting for someone else to meet you. You meet yourself. And in doing so, you open the door to a new kind of life, a life not shaped by fear or validation, but by freedom and intention. You begin to build relationships that are based on mutual respect, not emotional labor. You begin to say yes to opportunities that excite your spirit, not ones that drain it. You begin to experience joy not as a fleeting escape, but as a way of living. Because when you choose yourself, you stop surviving and you start thriving. You start stepping into the version of you that's been waiting all along, the one who doesn't chase, who doesn't settle, who doesn't perform, the one who stands rooted, radiant, and real, the one who is not waiting to be chosen, because she already is.